Okay, I want you to picture this. You're standing on this dusty, totally chaotic battlefield, and it's roughly 4,500 years ago. Your heart is absolutely pounding, you're gripping this sharply honed copper spear, getting ready to fight for your life. And then you look across the field and you see your enemy. He's holding the exact same weapon as you, but there's this one terrifying difference that just makes your blood run cold. He is wearing armor. In that single dreadful moment, you realize this isn't a fair fight anymore. That one single invention changes absolutely everything about human warfare. So, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is honestly one of the greatest survival stories in human history. We're going to track how humanity went from wearing raw animal skins to forging medieval steel, all the way up to the modern bulletproof vests that people wear today. This isn't just some story about war, you know? It's actually this fascinating look at human ingenuity and our just relentless drive to protect ourselves and, well, stay alive. All right, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the first defenses, move into the metal revolution, check out peak armor engineering, see how gunpowder changes literally everything, and wrap up with a modern comeback. Let's dive right in. Section 1, the first defenses. We're talking hides, bones, and fabric. You know, way before those shining knights of medieval Europe ever existed, ancient humans figured out a pretty fundamental truth. If you place a physical layer between your soft body and a weapon, your chances of surviving the day go way up. The earliest armor wasn't some huge metallurgical breakthrough, it was literally just thick animal hides. It started out super practically, people just wore heavy leather to keep from freezing. But over time, as skirmishes broke out, they realized, hey, this thick leather actually does a great job of reducing combat injuries too. It could stop a heavy punch or a weak, glancing blow. But as enemies started developing powerful spears and arrows that could effortlessly pierce right through that leather, well, the very first arms race had officially begun. Fast forward a bit to ancient Siberia, and things get really interesting. People living in that harsh environment created something truly extraordinary. Since they didn't have advanced metallurgy, they engineered this flexible body armor by taking hundreds of carefully shaped animal bones and meticulously tying them all together. Just think about that for a second. They were literally wearing the skeleton of an animal to save their own lives. Now, it might sound a bit strange to us today, but modern testing actually suggests it works surprisingly well against Bronze Age weapons. It was just a stroke of absolute engineering brilliance. Then, the ancient Greeks took this arms race to a whole new level by creating armor made almost entirely from linen. Yes, the fabric. They took layer after layer of linen and glued them all together until the material became incredibly rigid and tough. For a long time, historians actually thought this sounded kind of flimsy, but modern reconstructed experiments prove the exact opposite. When it's made correctly, this thick linen armor stopped arrows and resisted fierce sword strikes remarkably well. They were basically pioneering a principle of layering that, believe it or not, we actually still rely on today. Which brings us to Section 2, the Metal Revolution. So this is the era where civilizations finally moved beyond organic materials and started crafting solid, unyielding metal defenses. And it completely scrambled the math of hand-to-hand combat. Around 4,500 years ago, ancient Sumerian soldiers were marching into battle wearing these matching solid copper helmets. A bit later, Mycenaean warriors pushed this even further, creating full bronze armor that covered most of the body. But there was a massive catch here. Bronze was incredibly heavy, incredibly expensive, and immensely valuable, meaning only the absolute wealthiest warriors could afford to be protected like this. But then, this massive innovation by the Celts completely flipped the script and actually led directly to the Romans dominating Europe for over 600 years. So the real crucial turning point happened about 2,300 years ago. Celtic blacksmiths invented one of the greatest military technologies in all of human history: chainmail. They figured out how to link together thousands of tiny iron rings. And the result? A material that moved and flexed just like clothing, but was strong enough to stop a deadly sword cut right in its tracks. It was such an engineering marvel that Roman soldiers adopted it and relied on it for over 6 centuries. It's quite literally one of the longest used armor designs ever. Now, meanwhile, over in Asia, Japanese samurai were developing this absolutely beautiful armor, totally unlike anything they had in Europe. They tied together hundreds of lacquered plates using these vibrant, colorful silk cords. But what's super vital to understand here is that this wasn't just protection. It was a profound piece of art. Every single color, every pattern, it all represented the warrior's family, their status, and their honor. And beautifully enough, it was highly adaptable. When early firearms eventually made their way to Japan, the samurai actually evolved this exact same armor style to resist bullets. All right, Section 3, Peak Armor Engineering, the Medieval Knight.
Okay, so when most of us hear the word armor, this is exactly the era and the image that pops into our heads, right? But Hollywood has fed us a massive misconception here. If you watch the movies, you'd think medieval knights were these clunky, impossibly slow guys, barely able to walk under the crushing weight of their steel. The historical reality? Completely different. A properly fitted suit of plate armor represented the absolute pinnacle of engineering in medieval Europe. It was meticulously crafted to articulate perfectly with the human body. These warriors were remarkably agile. They could run, jump, effortlessly mount horses, even do acrobatic movements. Against the swords and arrows of their day, this armor was just terrifyingly effective.
Moving to Section 4. Gunpowder changes everything. But as we know, perfection rarely lasts very long in an arms race. Prepare yourself, because this represents a huge, dramatic turning point in the history of human conflict. Then, gunpowder arrived, and suddenly, literally, everything changed. Bullets fired from early guns could just punch straight through the exquisite plate armor that had reliably protected warriors for centuries. The ultimate defense was, almost overnight, totally obsolete. And this set off this absolutely wild chain reaction on the battlefield. First, bullets were easily punching through standard plate armor. So, in a desperate bid to keep their soldiers alive, armor makers responded the only way they knew how, by forging thicker, heavier, stronger plates. But they quickly hit a biological limit. The armor eventually became way too heavy and completely exhausting for a human being to wear in combat. So, piece by piece, soldiers just started ditching it. It's an incredible historical pivot. For nearly 2 centuries, most of the world's armies marched into the deadliest battles, fighting in little more than thin cloth uniforms. Armor, it seemed, was completely dead. Which brings us to our final section, the modern comeback. So the human desire to survive obviously didn't disappear. It just took a while for science to catch up and bring armor back to the front line. The big breakthrough finally happened in 1965, and remarkably, it was a total accident. A brilliant chemist named Stephanie Kwolek was working in a lab when she accidentally discovered a brand new material. That material was Kevlar. Science was about to change history all over again.
So what makes Kevlar so special? Well, it possesses these core traits that basically make it the holy grail of armor. It is incredibly lightweight and flexible, yet, for its weight, it's actually stronger than steel. It proved to be absolutely perfect for catching and stopping the devastating force of bullets. Today, police officers, soldiers, security personnel all around the world wear body armor that exists entirely because of this one miraculous chemical discovery. But honestly, here is my favorite, most poetic part of this entire explainer. When you look at how modern Kevlar vests are actually constructed, they rely on something called the layering principle. You layer materials together to spread the impact over a wider area and increase your chance of surviving. This brilliant modern chemistry relies on the exact same foundational engineering principle that those ancient Greeks used when they glued those layers of linen together thousands of years ago. After all this time, we are still just layering materials to stop a weapon. And that leaves us with this final, massive question. How do we survive the next attack? Because at the end of the day, armor has never really been about just looking powerful or intimidating. It has always been about one simple thing: staying alive. From animal hides, to Siberian bone, to Celtic chainmail, medieval steel, and now modern Kevlar, humanity has spent over 5,000 years locked in this exact same arms race. And you can be absolutely sure that as long as weapons keep evolving and becoming more destructive, armor is going to evolve right alongside them. The oldest arms race in history? Yeah, it's still happening right now.